Okay. Good. Sitting just a little bit forwards to begin with. Rubbing your hands together. Gently tapping over your face. Now over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. The other side. Upper part of the chest. The belly. And your legs. Good. Feet out. Dropping right back into your chair. You get a sense of sort of molding yourself to the chair. It depends on the chair you're using, but if you're in a very soft chair, then when you sit back, it will kind of mold itself around your body. The chair's harder, that's less likely to happen, of course. But you want to get the same feeling, but it's in a sense, it's your body, if you like, your back, your shoulders, your hips, that are softening and molding. But not just collapsing. So we sometimes use the term relax, but actually that is certainly a part of it, but by no means the whole story. And as you do this, then feel the effect on ribs, lungs, the belly, by extension, things like your breathing, and just a certain rhythm, a certain quality of movement within your body. Just notice where there may be stiffness and tension building. Change position, bringing your feet in. So again, I mean, I'm quite close to the front of my chair, but as always, do be aware of what's happening in your back. Go nice and easily and gently, and just turning your head. And then shoulders. Going forwards. Hands out to your sides, rotating from your shoulders. Winding your arms around. Back the other way. Rest your hands. Ease them forwards and push them back. And just trying to get a little sense of movement. And we know about the piece and the hips and so on, but also in the spine and ribs. So although your back remains sort of not straight, but when you're sitting up, your back is upright. There are these little curves in your spine and the back and so on and so forth. So it's an imaginary straight line that we maintain as we tilt forwards. The spine itself and your back does have these little curves, and they will change. They'll become straighter and deeper as you move forwards and backwards. So there should be this sense of movement in the back. And then just turn a little. And then in the other direction. And then go to that. That the other way. And then come back to the center. Raise your heel, step forward. Remember, a little bit of a push down. Just paying attention to details and small elements of these movements that are familiar to you. And it can be rather fascinating just to suddenly realize every now and then when you do this, when I do this, I find, so I suddenly notice something. It's like, oh, what's going on there? So on and so forth. sometimes that's something that has just started to happen, change sides. Sometimes it was always there, you just didn't notice it. So whilst it's nice to do complicated exercises, to learn new stuff and so on and so forth, sometimes it's also really good to look at the things that you think that you know. In fact, sometimes I find if I learn something new, I learn a new exercise, and I do something very familiar, and I think, hold on, that's quite like the one I've just learned, and there's something new going on there. So there's a balance to find there, I think. So hands at your sides. Bird folds its wings, going forwards. Nice, smooth, quiet movement in your arms and your hands, of course. Just recall that idea of carrying the tray of drinks, if that's a useful one for you, or whatever it is that sort of puts you back in touch with that feeling that you're looking for. You quite often find when we can find the sort of right idea, the right image, our body just naturally comes into the movement in the correct way, in the way that we're looking for it to happen. Focus for a little while on this rhythm of expansion and contraction, or opening and closing, if you prefer. Think about here in your ribs. So as you go back, there's this sort of opening out in the rib cage, and as you go forwards, the sternum, your chest bone folds in. It's like, you know, a folding door, just folding in slightly. There's a nice steady sort of movement. Evenly paced, both halves of the movement. And then when you've done that for a while, do the same thing, pay the same sort of attention to what's happening now between your shoulder blades, upper back. And then we feel that little bit of movement in the spine. So here, as you go back, it's as though the spine is the hinge of the folding door. These are very small movements, actually, when you might want to exaggerate them a little to see how they work in mechanical terms, but ultimately they're more felt than seen. And then feel the dynamic between those two movements, front and back. One closes, the other opens. And you may find that you're just aware not only of the upper part of your torso, but down through your sides into your belly and your lower back as well, also part of the movement. And your arms. Here, that feels like the automatic way that your arms would hang. Here, there's a little bit more effort involved, so to open out the arms. Not strain, never that. And then fisherman cast the net. rolling the ball in. See if you can find those patterns of expansion and contraction, opening and closing, working through your body with the different movements. And then pigeon spreads its wings. Pushing away, again, expansion, contraction, and it works on several different, I suppose, levels in some sense. Overall, when we do this movement, there's a feeling of expansion going forwards, and contraction coming back. And yes, at the same time, when we come back, there's this, perhaps expansion is no longer about opening within the body, within the chest, and then the closing, and the back opens and closes. So try not to get fixed on one way of viewing these things. Patterns like this, like yin-yang patterns, 5-element patterns, all these kind of things are fluid dynamic systems rather than something where we can turn around and say, well, this is this and this is that kind of thing. And what they are just models. They're ways in which we can view what's going on in our body, what's going on around us, that may just add to our knowledge. So, if they don't, then you don't have to use them. So, pigeon spreads its wings. Pushing away. And then punch with both fists. One more round. Letting your hands out. Changing, drawing in, pushing up, out. And then wild goose. And parting the clouds. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Good. Now pushing in two directions. Two directions being upward and outward, sideways, alternating just nice and steadily between the two. Try not to rush. And if we do notice that expansion and contraction, it's quite clear in this one. What you may notice is that we sort of speed up in that return in movement. It's almost like we're very focused on the outward movement, the pushing outwards, the reaching out, not so much on the drawing in. But we want to try and regularize that. We want to try and get them even. Really pay attention to that process of drawing in. We're going to go into the turn, and again, this can really highlight that tendency. I think the point where people go wrong most often in this exercise is when they've done the turn. So we push out here, and instead of doing what the exercise asks us to do, which is to come back to this position, they try and go straight to the next one. They kind of overlook this drawing into your center. So they go from here, and then they're kind of over there. And I think we do tend to disregard those processes of drawing into ourselves. We don't give them status in our culture so easily. And it's one of the things that I think is a great gift of Tai Chi, that it shows us that both are important. It's not that one is more important than another. But if you do notice that you're doing that, then you can really focus on just going slowly, maybe even a little bit slower to begin with, on those drawing in movements. Do one more round. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. And change, grasping the tiger's ears. Good. Switch sides. And change. One more time. Good. Now, okay, parallel. Just for a few moments, go back to this exercise with the elbows going forwards. And then change it so that your elbows are still going forwards, but you're alternating from side to side and just turning your body a little bit. I'm doing this quite big. Be careful because this can get quite sort of tight. Nice and smooth in your back. And then just let your hands come down so you're moving your shoulder. You could rest your hands for a moment. You're just doing this. Good. So what we're going to do is, when you bring your left shoulder over, just move the weight a little bit into your left leg. And come back to the middle. Go over to the right. A little bit like, as if you were going to do Wind Blows the Willows. And in some ways, it's a similar kind of movement. But not quite so far forward, more rolling. If you look at what I'm doing, I'm kind of rolling to the side. Let your hands drop down beside you. And this is an exercise called bear play, the seated version of bear play. So the image here is one that I really love. This image of the bear, rolling, fluid. There's a certain softness there, but also a certain strength. From the side, if I turn around, and as always, this is not the most comfortable position. I have to do it on one, but you see, it's just a circular movement here. And you want this hand to go down like the paw of the bear. So you kind of like open up on this side, the ribs open, and then there's this dropping down, almost like you're pushing down on a ball in water. That's all very exaggerated. So now there's this little push up and down. Only a very slight shift of your weight to the front, just enough to give you that sense of the arm going forwards. And this sort of wavy feeling in the spine, as though your spine were being very gently massaged by the movement. An exercise where we take certain liberties with the alignment of the posture. Mostly we wouldn't want to be sort of like this, but I suppose it's to get that movement. It's nice to just exaggerate things a little bit, but not too much. You don't want to strain in the movement. It's a bear play. Or, to be precise, it's an adapted version of part of bear play. I first learned it standing. Some of you I know have done the standing version with me. And then sometime later, I did bear play with somebody else, and it was a very long sequence of movements. I was quite, there's more to bear play than the bit that I've been doing, but I've tended to stick to this bit because I rather like it. Don't overdo the movement. We'll just do one more and then rest. So just sit for a moment. Get yourself in a comfortable position. Just focus for a little while on that sense of movement and energy, rhythm in your back and your spine. And then rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. And your arm. The other side. Upper part of your chest. Belly. Then your legs. Then stand. Something I've been trying to get across to people recently, something that I think is quite interesting about Tai Chi practice, is the function of memory. I'm not talking about remembering complicated movements, but remembering different aspects of movement. So it's like if you look at a photograph that you took when you're on holiday, you get certain feelings, sensations in your body. And in the same way, if you think of, say, bear play, if you felt that sense of movement in your back, can you get a sense of that movement in other exercises as well, where you're not kind of winding around quite so much? We'll do the standing version of bear play in a minute, but just our usual opening exercise is have a sense for the energy of your back and your spine as you do this. One more time. And then wild goose. And parting the clouds. Come forwards a bit so you can see. So begin to move your weight from side to side. Now, normally when we transfer the weight, we try and keep our hips and our shoulders at the same height. We try not to come up and down. But for bear play, we do. So what you want to do is, I'll exaggerate, come up, over a little curve and down. That is exaggerated. And then as I drop into my left foot, that's when the hip and the shoulder go forwards. And opposite way around. So now I'm winding around. Again, I'm exaggerating this a great deal. Be careful of your knees and your back. And then, just like we did in the chair, bring your arms into this movement, winding around, almost like your hands are on the pedals of a bicycle. And you're sort of using that movement to turn the pedals. Keep your hands in this position here, fingers pointing forwards, just on the edge of the body. And again, that rolling movement in hips, shoulders, nice movement in your spine and your back. As though the movement is just massaging your back. Let's do one more on each side. And shake out. So let's bear play. Part of a set of exercises called the 5 animal play. Quite an old set of exercises that were actually developed by a guy called Fu Shi, I think his name was. And he's well known in Chinese medical circles because he wrote one of the standard sort of herbal references in Chinese medicine. They have a massive kind of pharmacopoeia that they draw on in Chinese medicine. So and there were bear, bird, tiger, deer, and monkey were the were the five animals. This is pretty much anyone. I mean, I've done some of the others, but this is the one that I've really remembered. Now have your left foot forwards and get your stance right, get the transfer of your weight, feet sinking down, so on and so forth. The things that we're familiar with in this exercise. And then again, cast your mind back to that feeling of movement in bear play, you know, when we're kind of wriggling around a little bit. Don't start moving around like that, but see if you can just detect some of that kind of, or encourage, visualize some of that sort of movement, some of that energy still in your back as you move. So although in a lot of the movements, and particularly those ones most closely related to the Tai Chi forms, we're quite, in a way, quite strict, quite disciplined about posture. You know, shoulders in line with the hips, knees in line with the balls of the feet, so on and so forth. All these little kind of like postural things. We don't want that to be interpreted as a kind of like a rigid way. They sometimes talk about the parallel stances, standing to attention. But actually, I think it's a part, you know, we don't want that kind of thing. So we get that sense of movement through the back. And then, as we've done a little bit recently, as though you're carrying the tray of drinks. And of course, we need that movement in the spine to make the connection from our legs and feet to our arms and hands. Raising your toes and your heel. So if you can feel the movement building, particularly through your back, into your arms and your hands, it can actually help you be less inclined to overdo the movement of your arms because you feel the movement going into them. Stepping in. And then on the other side, just roll out the arms. Then raising your hands a little, carrying the tray of drinks. Raising your toes and your heel. Step in. and then take a few steps in whatever direction. You have a bit of space to do that. And then, haven't changed already, change direction. Finish with your left foot forwards and go straight into fisherman cast the net. Sink back, turn towards your front foot, wind blows the willows. Now, change sides and fisherman cast the net. And then turn in. Okay. Bring your feet back. Back to your chairs. These things, you know, the opening and the closing, the movement in the back, all the other things that I've covered at times, if we practice them as individual things, they become part of how we move. As I said, just thinking about them, remembering them can be an advantage, but so it's worth sometimes you focus on a particular aspect, maybe on a particular exercise to help you with that aspect. But eventually it kind of spreads. It's just an organic process, I think. So they're just letting things settle, coming back to the basic posture, feeling your weight through the chair into the ground, through your legs. Nice. open feeling up through your upper body. Try and sit in a way that doesn't tighten your back. So still perhaps a sense of that vibrancy, that energy in your spine and back. And then hands down to your sides and embrace tiger, return to mountain. One more time. And rest. Lovely. It was great. Well, it's weird. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you all next week.
Yeah, so take care of yourselves, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everybody.
I'll see you very soon.
Bye, Wendy.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Wendy.